Hello, can you hear me? Welcome to a live Koffie Break, if it's working. I'm your host, Keri Smith, host of the Deprogrammed channel, and I'm a little discombobulated. I'm streaming live from Amsterdam, but I've had some tech problems getting started, so I'm not actually even sure if it's working. And this is an impromptu stream, so if you're in the chat, hey Adam, I see some familiar faces. Let me know if you can see and hear. Okay, but I figured I would check in and say hello because normally, when my husband and I are not in Europe, I do Monday and Friday live shows, and so we've been trying to continue doing those while I'm abroad. I had special guest Mystery Chris, who's my usual Wednesday night co-host, with me on Friday. And then today, this is not the usual time. So if you're watching this, if it works and I leave it up and you're watching it later, I apologize. I just had to do it early because my husband has a show tonight. It's his final show in Europe. This one's here in Amsterdam, and it's at Zaal, Z-A-A-L, I think is what it's called. So I hope to see you guys there if you're in Amsterdam. Hey, Starzan. Good to see you. She says, stopping in to say hi. If you guys haven't seen it, please go watch my interview with Starzan. It was one of my favorites. We talk all about the dark side of the fat acceptance movement, of the body positivity movement and woke. So yes, go check that one out. Hello, it's good to see you. So I want to tell you guys, it sounds like everything's working okay with the tech finally. Awesome. Hey, Therese. So I want to tell you guys something really exciting. At my husband's show on, what was that, Saturday, I met several deprogrammed people that came out to the show. And I had met previously some people in Munich, but then this was the first time since Munich where people came out. And there were three folks there. We had a fun time and got to learn one person told me their screen name. The other person says they are silent observer. They don't usually comment. And I just wanted to say hi to those folks. Really brilliant people and very kind. And we had a great time talking after the show and enjoying it. And I'm just astounded. You don't understand. Or maybe you do understand how bizarre it is to go across the world and then be able to meet people like that, just have such a beautiful experience with humans across the world who you've connected with online without even realizing it in some cases, like, and being able to just pick up and have a conversation about the state of the world and the things that we have in common across the world, the things that are going on right now. And I just really felt blessed. So hello to those special people if you're watching, and I hope to see some more of you folks tonight at my husband's show. Anyway, it was cool. Hey, Jamie. Hello, Vermont Cheddar. Vermont Cheddar, I have to tell you, we've been having the best cheese. I mean, in Europe, everywhere we go. And here in Holland, of course, they have these great markets full of all the farmers bring their produce, like lots of cheese, those huge cheese wheels, and all kinds of fresh vegetables and fruits. And we got 2 different kinds of cheeses at one of the markets. Oh my gosh, the Dutch cheese, just so sweet and with like this taste of caramel maybe, and like crystallized. It's hard to explain. Just so good. When we get back to the States, which is coming up soon, we're going to be returning soon. My husband's like, we are eating so healthy because this whole trip, it's been, you're in vacation mood and you justify it because you're on the road and you want to try it when in Rome, right? So we're like, oh, we have to try all the coffee, all the cake, all the cheeses and breads. The bread is so good. And I titled this episode Koffie and Stroopwafel Break, just as a joke, because usually it's called Koffie Break. And because in the Dutch, that's coffee. They spell it Koffie. But Stroopwafel, if you haven't had a Stroopwafel, I'm going to have to bring some back. You can buy them in the supermarkets here, little ones. It's basically this flat, I would show you one, but we ate them all last night. It's this flat waffle, very flat, thin, like paper thin, 2 pieces of the waffle. Okay. In between it is a layer of sometimes caramel and sometimes honey. And they sell these little tiny ones here in the supermarkets. You can buy bags of them. But also, if you go to one of the markets or if you go to a bakery where they make them as big as your face, these huge waffles, just delicious. I walked in the first day, full day here. We were walking around the city and we walked into this bakery and I just said, what thing that because they were making lots of things there, right? They have the chocolate au pain, they have the chocolate bread and all these different delicious things. But I said, no, which thing is that smells so good right now? And they said the Stroopwafel. So we had that. Oh my God. Yeah, Starzen knows what they are. They are a wafer waffle sandwich with caramel. You put them on top of your coffee and let them melt from the steam of your drink. Oh my God, they're so good. Only gonna eat them here, with the exception of we might bring back one small bag, Starzen, and then when they're done, they're done. But like my husband says in the chat, hey, Anthony, I see you. They are the devil's most clever disguise. They're just sugar, delicious sugar. Okay. Yeah, dilute them in good coffee, says Vermont Cheddar. I had never had them before. So I'm just in heaven. It was a first for me. What else? Yesterday, we had just a moment being grateful for being sober. I posted about it, but I thought I'd share it too. We had a really great day. My husband didn't have any shows. He didn't have to work. So we took bicycles and we biked to a couple of villages about an hour away. And actually, one of the Deprogrammed folks who came out to the show on Saturday had told us where we should go, where there was like this huge lake we could go swimming. So we bike, and it was amazing because you're in the city and everything. I mean, it looks like a dirty city in some respects, new high rises going up, and it's just congested and everything, and traffic. And then all of a sudden, you're in the country. All of a sudden, it's just green everywhere and sheep. That was my first sign that some things were changing, as I looked over and I saw sheep and cattle and horses, and you smell the farms before you see them. And we're biking along, and there's this huge lake. It's like the biggest lake out here for Dujer Dam. I'm probably saying it wrong. That was one of the towns we went to. So there's this huge lake, and it looks like the beach. It looks like an ocean side where people would go to the beach and go swimming, but it's freshwater. It's a lake, but everybody's swimming, and we're biking on this bike path, just cutting through just this huge expanse, fields of green, gorgeous, like out of a postcard. And then we saw this little sign that said coffee, and I'm like, we're going. So we're stopping. Let's go. So there was this little roadside stand that had coffee and pastries and stuff. I don't know. We just got coffee. And then they said, yeah, over the hillside here, you couldn't see it from the stand, but they're like, everyone's swimming. So we walked over, and there's this beach full of people on the lake. So we went swimming. It was wonderful. The water was great. Then we got back on our bikes and biked through these 2 little towns. And in the second town, it was picturesque. It's something out of a fairy tale. These little houses right on the lake, and across there's like the houses, the houses lining the lake, the road and the bicycle path, and then green down to the water's edge. And they all have little fishing boats. And it just is so picturesque. And we were thinking, what if you grew up here and you were a teenager? Do you think you'd resent it? Anthony was saying, yeah, probably. Because you don't. Sometimes it takes into your adulthood to grow an appreciation for blessings that you grew up with, because they're just so common to you, right? So we're thinking, if you were growing up in this little picturesque village by the with all these farms around you by the lake, and you're a teenager, you're probably like, nothing ever happens here. Like, this town sucks. I want to go to Amsterdam, do drugs. Like, they probably don't appreciate it till they're older. Yes, Mark, it sounds like a slice of heaven. That's what we were thinking, and out of the way. But they're close enough by car. It only took us an hour to bike, and that was getting lost. It probably would have been much faster if we hadn't gotten lost. So by car, you're minutes probably from Amsterdam. but you're in this countryside, and it was just gorgeous. And I had a moment, I'm gonna tell you, it's sort of embarrassing, but not really. I'll share it with you because we shouldn't be embarrassed for stuff like this. I Anthony's kind of been laughing at me, but in a funny way. I if I see like I have one of these emotional moments where we were biking and we came around this farm and I just started crying because it's so beautiful. And he's laughing at me because I'm like, it's so beautiful. And like I just stopped biking to cry, but it's really this moment of just like I don't know. You know, how many years does any person have left? They don't know. And you have this beautiful day and this beautiful moment, and it's just this feeling of gratitude. And in so many ways, I feel like I don't deserve this, but God gave me this beautiful day. And that was wonderful. That moment was just, it was wonderful. So after the embarrassing cry, we continued biking to the end of this town, and they had an old church there, this really old cemetery that they still use. So you would see these ancient tombstones right next to headstones from that said like 2022. They still use it in this tiny little village. And we went into this pub. It felt like we were at the end of the it felt like we were at the end of the earth in some ways, because we had biked through to the very end of this village, and we go in there and they were playing 80s American music. They were playing uh, Toy Soldiers and The Never Ending Story and Video Killed the Radio Star. It was all 80s American music, and they were singing along, and they were playing pool, some of the locals, and we were talking to a couple. The bartender, she was great, and this other guy, this drunk guy at the bar, who looked like Ernest P. Worrell. and it was just this beautiful moment. We had a non-alcoholic beer, which are all, you can find them much more easily here for some reason. They're very popular here, non-alcoholic beers. And then we chatted with these locals about Texas and the Netherlands and the world and stuff. And then we got back on our bicycles and we biked back, and it was just like a beautiful day. And we were afterwards on the bike ride home, we were kind of laughing and talking. I just wanted to share this in case you are a person who struggles with any kind of addiction and that you want to leave behind, or maybe just you overuse something and you would like to stop. I will tell you this. We are about to hit, my husband and I, 4 years of sobriety, and I'm so grateful for it. And, you have moments. Somebody asked me the other day, do you ever miss drinking? And it's like, yeah, sort of in this nostalgic way once in a while. And that's when it's nice to have, like on a special occasion, like a non-alcoholic beer or something like that, or just have the bartender make you a fancy virgin drink. It's cool to have that nostalgia of like, oh, we're on vacation having something fancy, right? But I don't miss being drunk. No, I don't. I don't miss being a slave to it. And the thing about someone who has a drinking problem or any kind of addiction is you're not like a normal drinker. You can't have just one or two. Like with a non-alcoholic beer, you can have just one because you're not getting drunk, and one is pretty filling when you're not getting buzzed. It's like, oh, I'm pretty full now. I think I'll stop drinking this thing. It tasted good, but I'm done, right? But with an alcoholic, when you're drinking alcohol, it's like just one, you never stop there, right? And I don't miss what happens after that, like becoming a slave to it. And we were kind of laughing on the bike ride home and said, in our old life at that little pub, that's the kind of pub we could have sat and had beers at all night. The trip up until that moment had been so beautiful and picturesque, and we're doing physical exercise. We're on the bikes, everything's going swimming and everything. Then we get to the pub. Let's continue this fun. And we're having fun talking to the locals, and they like us, and let's drink more. And the old versions of ourselves, independently each or together, would have just had lots of beers. We were like, we probably wouldn't have even been able to bike home. We would have ended up sleeping at some local's house. like probably the guy that looked like Ernest P. Worrell. And we would have gotten up the next day at like 1 p.m. being like totally hungover and having to bike home. And what we could remember of the trip of that day would be sullied by getting drunk and being hungover. Do you know what I mean? And so I do not miss any of that. And I just want to say to you, if you struggle with it and you think you'll never quit or whatever, I used to think I would never quit, that it wasn't possible for me. And it was. And so just know that like crazier things have happened. Even you could stop. Even you could be having this moment a few years from now where you look back and you say, oh God, I'm so glad I don't drink anymore. Or I'm so glad I don't do marijuana anymore, or whatever the thing is that you overindulge on, right? So, yeah, just wanted to share that moment. Darkwater says, I feel so bad when I relapse, it stops me from using completely. Yes. It's sort of like if you have a drinking problem, we were explaining it to someone here that we met in Amsterdam because we were talking about all kinds of stuff a few days ago. Had like really great conversation, but this one guy was asking us about it and who's a normal drinker, this person. They can have like one or two and be done, right? And I was explaining, well, when you have a problem drinking, like when you're an alcoholic, it's pointless just to have one sucks. You know what I mean? And so you get to that point where you'd rather have just none. It's like all or nothing. And if you are someone who struggles with it, it's so much better just to have none than to have too many or to have one and be wanting more, right? One, which is like, oh, what's the point? So don't even have the one because you know you're not going to stop there. So anyway, Vermont Cheddar, 11 months, I'd fell off the damn wagon. Well, you can always get back on it. Maybe that wasn't your time yet. You know, do you know how many times I tried to quit? For years before I finally quit. So, and same thing for my husband before we knew each other. We had similar background of drinking problems in that way and also trying to quit and not being successful. And you never know when your time is. So I didn't intend to talk about all this sobriety and stuff today, but why not? It came up. Vermont Cheddar says, very proud of you, Keri. I think it's so hard to date and meet people and say, I can't have a drink. Well, let me ask you this. How old are you, though? Because that might be more common with young people, maybe. And I just don't know that. You know, we were talking with a young person actually in Germany about this who has quit drinking. And I think it's more expected I think that young people probably get more questions about like, why aren't you drinking? But for older people, I don't get that question that often. Or if I do, because I'm older, it's easy for me to make a joke of it, like a serious joke, dark humor joke, which is, I usually just say, oh no, I've had enough alcohol for many lifetimes. Like that way they know it's like, you know, I'm not judging you. It's nothing against drinking. I love it. That's why I don't do it. Right. Like, I think it's easier for older people to say that. So I don't know, Vermont Cheddar, but you could always try joking like that. If you're going on a date, just make a joke of it. Look, I have been there, done that. Vermont says, I hate drinking. I just have anxiety. Yes, but let me ask you this. Does the drinking actually help you manage anxiety? Like, is it a permanent solution for anxiety? Or is it just a crutch that you use in individual moments where you never actually master sitting with anxiety and getting past it because you're using the alcohol as a crutch, right? Like, what if you got rid of the alcohol and you learn how to sit with anxiety and manage it to a level where you didn't have it as much anymore? I felt like drinking in some ways, it prevented me from learning different skills or dealing with certain things, anxiety or emotions or whatever, because, you know, you could just have a drink and not think about it. So, okay, we don't have to keep talking about this, but I don't know, it came up. Today's going to be a short one anyway, because I have to get on the road soon a little bit, maybe in half an hour or so. We're going, like I said, my husband has his last European show tonight. So we're going to go get there just a little bit early. If you are in Amsterdam, I hope to see you there. I did want to look at something that's going on, though, in the States. Let me see if I can pull this up. So in New Mexico, somebody clued me into this. I've been really relying on you guys to tell me what's going on, because we haven't been online much, which has been a blessing. We've been reading a lot. Oh, I'm rereading The Diary of Anne Frank since we're here in Amsterdam, which I haven't read since I was very young, and it's great. I'll say, if you haven't read it recently, it's a really easy, quick read because it's a diary. Heavy subject matter, of course, but also really light subject matter because it's a diary of a preteen, 13 years old. I was telling my husband it's pretty funny because she writes about heavy subjects the way probably any of us would, where you still, like, I know when the COVID lockdowns and stuff were happening, and I journal. I didn't want to journal about all the world stuff. I just wanted to journal about stuff that was important to me, my personal life and growth with God and discoveries about life and stuff. But I had to, because the world events were infringing on my mental and emotional space. So at one point I was like, oh, I guess I should journal about the COVID policies and the lockdowns and the mask mandates. You kind of like just work it in your journal, but you don't really want to talk about it. She's kind of like that at the beginning because she got her diary and Frank for her 13th birthday. And so the first few entries are just sort of the stuff a 13-year-old would write about, and she's like trash talking her fellow classmates. It's pretty funny. She's like, and this person talks too much, and this person isn't smart, and this person is too full of themselves and rich and wears dresses that they're not old enough to wear, and she just like kind of just criticizing different classmates and talking about the ones she likes and the guys that are admirers of hers and stuff. And then maybe like 3 or 4 entries in, she's, as an aside, she's kind of like, mentions, yeah, there's all these regulations here now where they don't let Jewish people ride public transportation or have bicycles. And, and now we go to this new school because they made all the Jews go to Jewish school. And she just kind of mentions all these crazy things that have already happened as an aside. And I was thinking, yeah, that's exactly how someone would write about it when you're going through it, because you don't know what the future holds. And humans, I think, can become accustomed to almost any living situation. So by the time she gets this diary and starts writing these things, she's already in some ways become accustomed to some of these new crazy discriminatory laws. And so she's still talking about school and talking about her classmates and all this stuff an ordinary 13-year-old talk about. And she's like, oh yeah, we're not allowed to ride bicycles. We have to hide our bicycles, stuff like that. Isn't that crazy? And so then she also, at some point, once it's amazing to me, I'll just say this, it's amazing to me how fast things change, like how fast things fall apart. Like, she got the diary in June for her birthday, and then by July, they go into hiding. By July, which is just all of a sudden, it was her sister got a notice. They were sort of lazy, the Germans, at some point. Like, they weren't even going, they were going to houses and they were rounding up people, but they were also, at the beginning, they were sending notices and telling you to report. Like, they were like, come in so we can take you away to this camp. So they had sent a notice for her sister to report. And they had decided, the family, at that point, their dad was like, we had already, the dad had already been making plans for them to go into hiding. And so they stepped it up a bit. So she got the diary in June. They're in hiding by July. But everything had been sort of semi-normal until then, other than these regulations. But she was still going to school and they were still shopping. There were things that were like normal happening in her life. Then they're in hiding. And then by November, just like 5 months later, she's writing about hearing stories about like all of her former friends, like everyone who's Jewish being military vehicles going down the streets every night and just going to people's homes and asking, "Do Jews live here?" and rounding them up, or going with lists where they knew Jewish people were living and rounding them up. And they have rations. She writes about the rations. And again, she writes about it in the way that a person would, where it seems like just you just adjust to things. You just accommodate new impositions and stuff. So they started having rations of, people in Holland had to have, they can only have buy a certain amount of butter at a time, things like that. And you had to buy, and because they were Jewish people and they were in hiding, they weren't even allowed to get these rations papers to get butter. So there was like a thriving black market where they were buying ration cards on the black market, or having Dutch people were doing it for them and going and buying food and stuff for them. But there's like little mentions in there about, they went over their electricity ration for the month. So their power might get cut off by the government for 14 days, no lights, no electricity, and things like that are just kind of dropped in. And it's sort of crazy because you're like, I've heard this phrase before, in regards to things that are happening in the world currently, which is that when things fall apart, it happens really slowly for a while, happens really slowly, and then it happens very fast. And I think that you can see that in this diary, the Diary of Anne Frank, where it's like things had been happening slowly for a while. But when she starts the diary, she's already talking about, regulations that had been passed and stuff that were discriminatory against Jewish people. But then when the actual genocide started and they started taking people away and killing them and stuff, it's like, boom, it just happened like that, like fast. I don't know if that makes sense. But anyway, I would suggest rereading it if you haven't read it in a while. And she's funny. She's funny. She's a good writer. She's like an average, intelligent teenager. And so, yeah, I've been reading that. Okay, I went down that tangent. What I was looking for that I wanted to talk about, because we've been reading and we haven't been online a lot, I've been relying on you guys to tell me what's happening in the world. And there was some people told me about what's going on in New Mexico. Now, if you guys have a good link, drop it in the chat. I've got one that I'm pulling up right now. Hold on. Let me see. The New Mexico governor, who, as I understand it, what she's done is a violation of the First and Second Amendment, because she's declared by emergency medical order, which is kind of crazy, that people cannot carry guns in Albuquerque, New Mexico, either concealed or open carry. And as many people have been pointing out, that's a great way to become a dictator and an authoritarian, is just to say, I'm, as a governor or as a president, to issue an emergency order, like we've seen happen many times in the past few years. An emergency order where you overthrow the Constitution, you say, I had to do it, it was an emergency. You could do that for anything. Okay, so she's doing this for guns. Here, let me bring up this article before we watch a video. Sorry, give me 1 second. Can you guys see that? I think my Wi-Fi is a little iffy here. Darkwater says, my stepfather would be pissed if he was there. Is it just for Albuquerque? I think it's just for Albuquerque right now. Yeah, okay, so here's a headline. This is from CNN. And this one's from yesterday, September 10th. Gun rights organizations sue New Mexico governor over gun violence order. There she is. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. Okay, the National Association for Gun Rights. I'll make this larger so we can see it. The National Association for Gun Rights filed a lawsuit against New Mexico's. Why? Why is there this huge ad? I don't want to see this. And it's in Dutch, so I don't know. Is this the button? Do you guys think this is the button to make it go away, or there? Maybe that's the button. No. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We have to look at this Dutch ad. I don't know how to make it go away. Okay. The National Association for Gun Rights filed a lawsuit against New Mexico's Democratic governor and health secretary Saturday over orders declaring gun violence a public health emergency and suspending open and concealed carry laws in cities and counties based on crime statistics. Governor Michelle Grisham issued the emergency order after the shooting deaths of 3 children from July through September, as well as a pair of mass shootings in the state. The lawsuit filed in the U.S. District Court for New Mexico on Saturday lists Grisham and New Mexico Department of Health Secretary Patrick Allen as defendants. The National Association for Gun Rights argues in the lawsuit that the orders violate the Second Amendment. The state must justify the carry prohibition by demonstrating that it is consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. But it is impossible for the state to meet this burden because there is no such historical tradition of firearms regulation in this nation, the lawsuit reads. Throughout the suit, the plaintiffs cite a 2022 Supreme Court decision that struck down a New York gun law that restricted the right to concealed carry outside the home. The lawsuit also lists Albuquerque resident Foster Allen Haynes as a plaintiff. Haynes intended to partake in the state's open carry law, according to the complaint. Quote, Haynes is precluded from doing so by the carry prohibition, which deprives him of his fundamental right to keep and bear arms for lawful purposes, protected by the Second Amendment, the lawsuit reads. So the plaintiffs have asked the court to grant an injunction prohibiting the emergency order from being enforced. A second lawsuit was also filed Saturday against Governor Grisham, Allen, Department of Public Safety Secretary Jason Bowie, and State Police Chief Troy Wessler by a Bernalillo County resident Randy Donk and the Gun Owners of America. The suit likens the executive order and the public health emergency declaration to martial law. It is. It is. She's saying, and what's crazy is it's a health order, which you start to see when talking about things falling apart, you start to see people authoritarians using ridiculous reasons and justification for tyranny. It's like during the COVID years when the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, said that landlords couldn't evict people. It's like, what does the CDC have to do with property rights, enforcing property rights? Nothing. And it's like, what is this? What is an emergency health order? How does that have anything to do with our Second Amendment rights? Nothing. The lawsuit also asked the court for an immediate temporary restraining order and later a preliminary and permanent injunction to be granted. Carolyn Sweeney, a spokesperson for the governor, said in a statement Sunday that the governor is, quote, prepared to fight challenges to her decision. Listen to this statement, quote, gun violence is a public health emergency. Anytime you hear public good, the phrase public good or public emergency or public health emergency, anything about the public good, be very, very, very suspicious. Very suspicious, because they're trying to push something through that actually doesn't benefit the public. It's actually, they're couching it, they're hiding it in this sort of it's for the good of everyone, just like the COVID restrictions, the restrictions on individual liberty. Gun violence is a public health emergency, they say, in the state, and extraordinary measures are required to prevent more innocent New Mexicans from being killed by guns, the statement said. So because these tyrants, these authoritarians decided they don't want to see anyone else die from a gun, that they feel it's justified to violate the Constitution of the United States and to violate our Second Amendment rights, that they alone get to make that decision. that they get to decide what's right and wrong, that they are smarter and more important than the US Constitution. And you and all the residents in New Mexico, that they know more, that they're more moral and they're more just. And their ends justify the means. That's what's happening here. Look at this line. CNN has reached out to the Department of Health for comment on the lawsuits. What the F does the Department of Health have to do with the Second Amendment? Nothing. It says Governor Grisham last week also issued a statewide enforcement plan that includes a 30-day suspension of open and concealed carry laws in Albuquerque and surrounding Bernalillo County. The order, which went into immediate effect, temporarily bans the carrying of guns on public property in those counties with certain exceptions. According to the governor's office, citizens with carry permits will still be allowed to possess their weapons on private property, such as gun ranges and gun stores, if the firearm is transported in a lockbox or if a trigger lock or other mechanism is used to render the gun incapable of being fired. The order also prohibits firearms on state property, including state buildings and schools, as well as at parks and other places where children gather. Under the order, licensed firearm dealers will be inspected monthly by New Mexico's Regulation and Licensing Division to ensure compliance with sales and storage laws. This, in my opinion, I saw people, thankfully, when I did, someone told me, you need to read about what's happening in New Mexico. And when I looked at it, I was very happy to see that people are pushing back strongly against it. Not only are these lawsuits that have been filed against it, but this is the sort of thing that it can't be treated lightly because it's a test case. This tyrant in New Mexico is just one among many tyrants who are in public office. If there are not harsh consequences for what she's doing, others will follow suit. Look at that freak in California, Gavin Newsom. I'm surprised he didn't try this before her. You think he's not going to try this next? Not only should she be impeached, fired, whatever, she should lose her job as a public servant, but she should be put in prison. In my opinion, she needs to be arrested and there needs to be a trial. You can't just say, hey, guess what? I'm suspending the Constitution in my state. You're not protected by the Constitution anymore, citizens of New Mexico. Oh, and then somebody pointed this out. Yeah, Southern Belle says even David Hogg didn't agree with it, which was shocking. Even David Hogg was like, this is the wrong way to go about this. So one of the things that I saw people doing, let's see if I can get this video on the screen, is they've been protesting in New Mexico in a pretty badass way by going out with their guns. Here. See if you can see this. My husband and I were just in New Mexico a couple of months ago. We went through there. Old Town, I know where this is. So it says, just in, residents in Old Town Albuquerque openly defy New Mexico governor's emergency executive order banning the open and concealed carry of firearms. Let's watch this. This is the way it's done. You can't, if enough people stood up and openly defied these unconstitutional emergency public health orders, if enough people did this, they would not be able to enforce it. It's the same thing. They're going to try and bring back mask mandates. And I hope people stand up together this time and openly defy it. Just defy it. If there's enough people who do it, don't be afraid. There were those of us who defied it last time, but it was like few and far between. And also, I didn't feel very vocal last time about telling people, I think you should defy this with me, because it was like new. And I don't know everybody's specific situation, but this time I feel more comfortable saying, when they try to bring back these unconstitutional orders where they say you can't go outside without a mask and things like that, openly defy it. Stand with me. Stand with those of us who are saying, no, I'm not doing this bullshit again. And I love this. Look, let's watch this.
Time is riddled, and all we want to do is protect our families, our friends, our communities. I've gone on 2 combat tours with the Marine Corps and fought on the front lines. I've done 11 trips as an independent contractor. She thinks she has the right take away my freedom to protect my community. I don't think so. This will not stand. We will not comply.
Yes.
Look what the U.S. government did to the Native Americans. They try to strip them of their rights. This is the same thing. Our Apache brothers resisted to the very end. Navajos, we got to be the same. Resilient.
Keep an eye on my stuff. I was trapping my 13 years and the law doesn't protect us. I'm an indigenous person. That's why my kid is here. The law doesn't protect us. And nobody helps the government. The government does not like indigenous people. We need to see the mother sterilizing our children, sterilizing our women, raping, thinking that is okay. Oh, that's a challenge. Can I tell you now? No more! You're not going to step on my line doing that crap! No more!
I'm going to pause it right here. I love it. I love it that this woman, this Native American woman, is like, the government doesn't care about indigenous people. And they're talking about how, because this is New Mexico, so you have a high population of indigenous people, higher than some of the other states. And they're like, you know, they did this to Apaches who resisted to the very end. They tried to disarm them. And we're going to be resilient. And this woman's just this base Native American woman is like, they are not going to disarm us. I love it. So anyway, more of this. I'm going to stop sharing this now. I want to see more. I want to see more of this in New Mexico. Oh, thank you for the super chat. Sellsworth 4.99 says the governor acknowledged that criminals would not obey her order. How would an order only affecting reasonably responsible, decent people help? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They never have an answer for this because almost all gun owners are reasonable, decent people. The ones that will follow immoral, unethical, unconstitutional laws are not the ones committing crimes. One of the people I met out here, Sellsworth, the Deprogrammed people who came to the show, was talking with me after Anthony's show and said something really interesting. By the way, I don't think this person will mind me telling a little bit of his story. So he used to be trans, lived as a woman a few decades ago, never got the surgery, is very glad he did not get surgery, lives as a man now, desisted or what have you, and has just a very interesting story about coming to terms with everything he was going through or considering. And we talked about the soul and all kinds of interesting things. Anyway, one thing this person said that I thought was so interesting, he was like, you know, we were talking about what they're doing to kids and sterilizing kids and cutting off kids' body parts and the whole trans part of social justice. And he was like, I don't understand. You guys in the United States have so many guns. Why a parent hasn't done something awful? Not that I want them to, but nobody's like, done anything awful to any of these doctors and hospitals and stuff that are doing this to children. And he's like, not that I want them to, again, not advocating for this. I'm just shocked because you guys have so many guns. And it seems like parents' passions would be riding high. And what I said to him was, yeah, because, despite what they tell you about us gun owners in the United States, almost all of us are responsible, level-headed people when it comes to weapons. So you don't see that, And he was like, that's a great point. I'm like, yeah, how we have so many guns in the US and you don't see stuff like that because they want all the stereotypes they push about gun owners. It turns out a lot of them are false. Even the stuff they push about like January 6th, where they were like, oh, it was a coup, it was an insurrection. Really? Where were all the weapons? Conservatives have weapons. Why didn't they bring them? They didn't bring them because they weren't trying. It wasn't an insurrection. That's not what it was. It was a protest that went too far. Yes. It was not an attempt at overthrowing whatever whatever they try to paint it as in the news. It's ridiculous. If that were to happen, you would know. Like it would look very different. Anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Okay, I've got one more, if I can find it. There was one more link I wanted to show. Hold on. If I can pull this one up. By the way, at that protest we just watched a clip from, where many of the protesters are visibly armed and they rallied in Albuquerque to defy the New Mexico governor, the police did not intervene. They did not enforce the order, which is great. So once again, I think, because it's like, what are you going to do? Just start arresting all these citizens for exercising their constitutional rights? Here. This is the video clip I want to watch. Okay, this was posted by Benny Johnson, and it's just a little bit over 1 minute long. So this is where the governor of New Mexico basically says the First and Second Amendment don't exist. Like, they're not important. I can overthrow them because I'm governor. Okay, here we go. Eno says, lovely, Keri, welcome to Amsterdam. Well, thank you for the welcome. Hey, if you're not doing anything tonight, come to Zaal, Z-A-A-L. My husband is playing there at 8, and I would love to meet more people. So, okay. Betty Johnson shared this clip. A lot of people shared it, but his was one of the first ones I saw when I was looking for stuff. So this is what he says about it. He says, the governor of New Mexico has just declared the First and Second Amendment, quote, does not exist due to a, quote, emergency. Under this legal theory, all of our rights are essentially eliminated. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly what it means, is that any tyrant, once they rise to a powerful position, an executive position like governor, like president, that any tyrant, if we allow this to happen and we don't make sure this woman feels the consequences of what she's done, that any tyrant can suspend any of our constitutional rights because they say it's an emergency. That's bullshit. I think this woman should do prison time. I do. Okay, so under this theory, all of our rights are essentially eliminated. Watch the most evil and tyrannical 60 seconds you've ever heard from a politician. So here we go.
Yeah.
But
your point is valid.
You took an oath to the Constitution. Isn't it unconstitutional to say you cannot exercise your carrying license?
With one exception, and that is if there's an emergency, and I've declared an emergency for a temporary amount of time, I can invoke additional powers.
So who decides what the emergency is? She does. Tyrant. I know some of you didn't like Game of Thrones finale, like the last season and what Daenerys did, but I loved it. I loved it because I thought this is exactly what always happens. You get someone in this powerful position, it goes to their head, and they start acting like they're God. And that was what Daenerys was doing at the end. She even said to Jon Snow, he was like, well, who decides who lives and dies in the pursuit of like a good ending? Because she was basically like, well, we have to kill these people. So for this good reason, right? And he's like, well, who gets to decide that? And she said, we do. And that's what this governor is like. The guy's like, aren't you supposed to uphold the Constitution? Didn't you swear an oath to protect the Constitution? Yeah, I did, except in an emergency that I get to decide what's the emergency and when I don't have to follow the Constitution. Like, what a tyrant. What a power drunk God, fake God, false God she's become. I'm going to rewind it just a second. She's like, yeah, when it's an emergency, I decide. She decides.
Emergency for a temporary amount of time, I can invoke additional powers. No constitutional right, in my view, including my oath, is intended to be absolute. There are restrictions on free speech.
In my view, did you hear that? No constitutional right is in my view, she says, in my opinion, is intended to be absolute. Oh, thanks for your constitutional wisdom. What the F is your name again? Governor Grisham. You're smarter, you're more important, you're more moral than the Constitution. Which the Constitution is the protection of our rights. It's not giving us things, it's telling us things the government can't do to us, like what you just did to people in New Mexico. It says you can't do that to people. The Constitution isn't giving us gun rights. We have gun rights. We have the right to self-defense. We're born with it. We're endowed with it from our Creator. We have the right to pursue life, liberty, happiness. We have the right to protect ourselves and defend ourselves. The Constitution didn't give us those rights. We have those rights. The Constitution says what the government can't do. The government can't prevent us from exercising those rights, which is what she just did.
There are restrictions on free speech. There are restrictions on my freedoms. In this emergency, this 11-year-old and all these parents who have lost all these children, they deserve my attention to have the debate about whether or not in an emergency we can create a safer environment. Because what about their constitutional rights? I took an oath.
I'm sorry. She doesn't even, what is she talking about? What about their constitutional rights? It is illegal to murder someone. Two wrongs, you don't justify a wrong with another wrong. So someone was murdered, so she says, this evil was done, there was someone murdered, so I am going to commit an even greater evil and take away the Second Amendment rights of every person in New Mexico. That's insane. That doesn't do anything to help that mother of the child who was murdered. You've just heaped evil upon evil.
Uphold those two. And if we ignore this growing problem without being bold, I've said to every other New Mexican, your rights are subrogated to theirs. And they are not, in my view.
Wait a minute, though. You're talking about crimes. There are already laws against crimes.
Yes.
So how are their rights?
I got it, but again.
Yes, sorry, I almost cursed. She's a freaking moron. And this guy's right to point this out. He's like, there's already laws against crimes, against murders. That's how you get justice. You prosecute the person who did the murder. Just like how we get justice against this governor is that you guys in New Mexico impeach her. And I would say bring charges against her. Because what she's doing, you can't just invalidate the Constitution. She has to pay consequences for what she's just done, trying to take away the constitutional rights of people in New Mexico, just like the person who committed that murder that she's talking about has to pay the consequences for what they've done.
So how are their rights?
I got it, but again, if I'm unsafe, who's standing up for that right?
You're always unsafe, you freaking moron. Life is unsafe. You are more unsafe because of cars and vehicles than you are because of guns. Your odds of dying as a result of a car accident are astronomically higher than your odds of dying as a result of gun violence. Does that mean that she could declare an emergency order and ban all cars? Well, I guess she could if she wanted to. According to her, she decides what's the emergency and what's the appropriate course of action. We're not safe, are we? Cars make us a lot more unsafe than guns do. Any number of things. This is a lie that these authoritarians are trying to push. They sell it with fear. You're not safe. Oh my gosh, you're supposed to be safe. You have a right to be safe. Nobody has a right to be safe. That's not endowed from a creator, the right to be. Life isn't safe. Spoiler alert, we also die. Like, that's what life is. I'm a little speechless by this. Sorry. I'm not looking at chat. Should I look at chat? What do you guys? You guys probably have better comments than I do on this. I just find it infuriating. hold on, let me just scroll through. Eno says public health is the same cancer that will undermine our rights if we let them use this escape. In Europe, we have similar issues, yet with different human rights. Yes. I've been noticing here in Europe, that you guys have become accustomed to a lot more, I guess, intrusion on your personal choices and freedoms and liberties than we have. My husband was talking this morning about something in the news about Germany and the allotted energy consumption per person, the ideal amount of energy consumption, and just this idea that the government has a right to know how much energy you're consuming or using, or how much heat you're paying for in your home and things like that. It's like, no, I don't. In some ways on this trip, I've been so grateful to be here and to be able to experience all this. But I've enjoyed it because I've also become more grateful for a lot of the freedoms and rights and the culture that we have in America. And, look, I'll say it. I really love our large refrigerators. I really love them. I'm not saying nobody in Europe has one, but it seems pretty common to have little ones. Also, a lot of people here have just like a washer, but no dryer. We have washers and dryers. Also, because of energy standards in Germany, we found out like a lot of the dryers that they sell, it takes 3 hours to dry your clothes. And as an American, we're like, what? Like, put it on the 45-minute cycle. They're like, no, that doesn't work here. I'm like, no. So I've come to appreciate certain things about America, and I don't care if it makes me seem like a stereotype, or like, I love my big truck. I love my big refrigerator. I love my air conditioning. I love the washer and dryer. I love the short cycles, like these things that we're paying for that I should be able to pay for if I want to. Anyway, sorry, that's a little aside. Somebody in the chat says, Vermont says, I love refrigerators. Me too. I'm never going to take my big refrigerator for granted again. Never. We have a friend coming to stay with us in October from Europe, first time in America. And I was like, oh man, we're going to show this friend all the big stuff, like the biggest trucks, the biggest refrigerator. Biggest air conditioner. Okay, let's finish this infuriating video. I had to take an aside because this woman's driving me crazy. She's like, we have a right to be safe. What the F are you talking about?
Who's standing up for that right?
It's already
This
illegal
climate
to
is
murder
so out
someone,
of
you
control.
moron.
Somebody should do something. I'm doing as much as I know to do.
Madam Governor, do you really think that criminals are going to hear this message and not carry a gun in Albuquerque on the streets for 30 days?
No.
Then
But
why
here's
do
what
it?
I do think. It's a pretty resounding message.
Did you hear that? That's what somebody mentioned before. She just admitted that this unconstitutional executive order, emergency order, that no criminal is going to follow it anyway. So she's basically just infringing on the rights of law-abiding citizens and gun owners. Screw her. If you're in New Mexico, I hope you do something about this. I hope she feels the consequences of her actions, and I hope you make an example of her to other wannabe authoritarian governors, and you don't let her get away with this. So I need to read more about this. I want to keep following it. But if you're in New Mexico, like, drop me a line or whatever. Tell me what's happening there, because I want to see this. I want to see this woman pay the consequences of this. I think it's very important what just happened there. And disturbing. Very disturbing. Okay, I have to go. I know this was a short one, but and an impromptu one at a different time, but I had fun hanging out with you guys. I've got to go. My husband's got his last show in Europe tonight in Amsterdam, and we've got to get on the road. We're walking there. We've got to get on the road walking there. And so anyway, I've had fun hanging out with you guys. And if it was your first time here, just kind of things have been a little unusual this month because I've been traveling in Europe with my husband. But usually we do a live Koffie Break show where we talk about specific subjects or sometimes what's in the news, or we have guests. That's every Monday and Friday, usually at 1 o'clock Central Time. And then Wednesday night, we do an 8 o'clock live show about pop culture with my friend, Mystery Chris. And usually Thursdays, I do interviews about social justice with different interesting people. The most recent one was with Starzan, who was in the chat today, about the dark side of the body positivity movement and how it's a part of social justice and woke. And I would definitely recommend you check that one out. Hope you guys have a fun week, and I will talk to you later. Bye, Adam. Bye, Therese. Thank you. See you guys later. Don't piss off any Subway employees. I'm going to try not to. Cool. Take care, guys.